Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. We're going to be getting started in just a minute as we let people join from across the country. For folks that are joining, we're just going to start in just a minute or so, just waiting, giving people time to join that are joining from across the country. Great. Well, let's get started. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. My name is Cristina Sensun Ramirez. I've been doing political and organizing work here in the Latino community. And I can tell you, after doing 20 years of hard political work in the Latino community here in Texas, that we are at a critical inflection point in our state because we know that breakthroughs, historical political breakthroughs, are made not just by great candidates, and we have great candidates that we are supporting, from Gina Hinojosa for governor to James Tallarico for Senate. But they are also defined and able to make history in the political context and the moment they find themselves in. And in this moment, we are ripe for change in Texas. We are a coordinated group of Latino civic engagement, voting rights organizations that are mobilizing Latinos across Texas. We all know that demographics are not destiny, but they are simply a core ingredient in the recipe for change. And another core ingredient in making change is organizing. That's why we're working together to recruit and mobilize volunteers across Texas to knock on hundreds of thousands of Latino voters' doors, organize on campus, reach millions online, even organizing at quinceañeras. We will be anywhere and everywhere Latino voters are this election. We know we have to be coordinated because Latinos, while they may still call us a minority majority state, we are actually the majority. Latinos are the largest ethnic group here in Texas. 1 in 5 Latino voters call Texas home, and 1 in 3 eligible voters are Latino. That is tremendous political power and potential, but it can only be realized when we organize and invest in our community. We know that we can flip Texas this election cycle, and it will be because of Latino voters. And we're clear that flipping Texas won't just change the political outcomes for an election cycle in our state. No, it's going to change the political outcome and possibilities of our country for an entire generation. That is the power that Latino voters hold this election. So you're going to hear from the groups that are coordinating and working in historic fashion across Texas to make sure that Latinos can exercise their full political power and get behind candidates that will truly deliver on the issues that matter to our community. I want to ask you, we also have a chat going, a Q&A. Feel free to drop your questions there. We'll be collecting them and going through them at the end. I want to hand it off to Vianney Preciado from Votar es Poder to talk a little bit more about the work we're doing together. Vianney?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Christina. Good morning, everyone. I am Vianney Preciado. I am a representative of Votar es Poder PAC. Es Poder PAC is an initiative activated each election cycle to make sure that Latino voters have access to the information they need in order to make their voices heard at the ballot box. Our goal is simple, making sure that we ensure our priorities, concerns, and issues impacting Latino communities are part of the conversation and reflected in our democracy. Latino voices matter, and they deserve to be heard through participation in every single election. As a Texan, this election cycle is important. I'm from South Texas, proudly born and raised. This is my community, and I want to see my neighbors and families thrive. But this is not the reality right now because I know what it's like. I live here and I've seen the experience firsthand. South Texas, my beloved community, is one of the most important regions in our state, not just politically, but also economically and culturally. The voices of families across our communities help shape decisions that affect all Texans. The issues that people care about here are clear: affordable housing, good paying jobs, quality healthcare, strong schools, and reliable infrastructure. We want opportunities for future generations. These are not just issues that impact South Texas, they are Texas issues. Our communities want leaders who are going to listen, show up, and work to address real challenges. They want practical solutions that improve everyday life and not just campaign promises. That's why voting matters. Every vote is an opportunity to make sure that our priorities are heard and our communities are represented. Elections have consequences, especially at the state and local levels, where decisions affect our neighborhoods directly, our schools, our roads, and our healthcare systems. In Texas, we're meeting Latino voters wherever they are, at community events, churches, parks, community centers, local businesses, and doorsteps. We're knocking on thousands of doors, making thousands of calls, sending text messages, placing ads, developing literature, and holding town halls to share information in order to make sure that our community is informed and engaged. We're having real conversations about the challenges that Latino families face and reminding people that this November, their voices matter. Through outreach, education, and organizing, we're helping our community show up at the ballot box and hold politicians accountable. Texas deserves representation this November. Thank you. And now I will go ahead and hand it over to Eric Holguin.
Thank you for that. Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Holguin, and I'm the Texas State Director of Unidos US Action Fund PAC. Unidos US recently released polling on Hispanic voters across multiple states, including right here in Texas and in key congressional districts. I want to take a few minutes to talk about what that data means politically, because I think it's important and very telling of what November can look like. Latino voters in Texas are not a side conversation anymore. We are the conversation. The seats that decide whether Democrats take back the House run right here through the heart of Latino Texas. Texas 15, Texas 23, Texas 28, Texas 34, Texas 35. These are our communities in the Rio Grande Valley, Laredo, San Antonio. You cannot flip those seats without Latino voters. And what this poll is telling us is that the conditions to do that, to do exactly that, are sitting right in front of us. Now, in 2024, Trump made real inroads with Latino voters here in Texas. I'm not going to pretend that didn't happen. But here's what's also true. Those gains are not holding. A significant share, 1 in 5, of Latino voters who pulled the lever for Trump in 2024 say today that they would not do that again. While it might not seem like, well, it's actually a huge share. So losing 20% of voters who helped get you into office is a significant loss of support, and it's not a great start as we head into election season. And when you ask them why, the answers are not complicated. Costs are up, communities are scared, and the economic relief they were promised has not shown up. This is a broken promise, and Latino voters in Texas know it. The immigration enforcement piece is something I want to be really direct about because it's personal for communities like mine. We're not talking about people who crossed the border last week. We're talking about both citizens and our undocumented community. We're talking about the people who are born here, who grew up here, who have lived here their whole lives. They are afraid to go to work, afraid to take their kids to school, afraid to walk into government office. And nearly half the voters we surveyed said that they know people who fear being targeted by immigration authorities because even though they have every legal right to be here. That's not a border security debate. That's a civil rights crisis. And it's absolutely driving people towards the ballot box. So here's where we are heading into November. Democrats lead with Latino voters in Texas, but the margin is not locked in and motivation still needs to be built. What gives me confidence is who these new voters are. About 20% of Latino voters in Texas cast their first ever ballot in 2024. Another big chunk voted for the first time in 2020 or 2022. These are voters who are still forming their political identity. They came out once. If Democratic candidates show up in their communities and talk to them about what they actually care about, the cost of groceries, wages, healthcare, their right to live without fear, those voters will come back and they will bring people with them. If we look at the Senate race with Latino voters, Texas State Rep James Tallarico leads Texas Attorney General Paxton 51% to 24%, with roughly 1 in 4 voters undecided or saying they do not know enough to say. In the gubernatorial matchup, Texas State Rep Gina Hinojosa leads Governor Greg Abbott 53% to 26%, with 21% either undecided or unsure. So the path to flipping Texas runs through this community. This poll shows the door is open, and what happens next on whether Democrats what happens next depends on whether Democrats are willing to do the work to walk through it. Thank you very much, and I'll pass it over to Michelle Vallejo of Latino Victory Project.
Thank you, Eric. Hola a todos, and thank you to all of our partners for being part of this critical work. I am Michelle Vallejo, Senior Advisor to Latino Victory Texas Coalition and former candidate and Democratic nominee for Texas 15. At Latino Victory, our mission is simple: to build Latino political power. Today, Latino voters make up more than a quarter of all registered voters in Texas. And overall, Latinos make up over 40% of the population of our entire state. And yet, the needs of our communities are still overlooked, our families are underserved, and our neighbors and children are being politically attacked. This is why our work here is critical. At Latino Victory, we organize year-round. We invest in Latino leaders up and down the ballot. We recruit candidates, train organizers, support elected officials, and engage communities long before the final weeks of an election cycle. Because building Latino political power isn't about one election. It's about building lasting relationships, developing leaders, and creating a culture of civic participation that will shape Texas for decades to come. Latino voters in Texas are not a future demographic. We are a political force now. And our job is to make sure every Latino voter in Texas understands the power that already exists within our own communities. That is why we are proud to stand alongside this coalition today. No single organization can do this work alone. Building lasting political power requires partnership, trust, and a shared commitment to reaching voters who too often go unheard and unseen. Together, we are working to engage Texans across the state, including communities that may not regularly hear from campaigns, may not realize the power of their vote, or not believe that their participation can make a difference at all. But it does. And this is how we will help elect champions like Gina Hinojosa, James Tallarico, Bobby Pulido, Johnny Garcia, and many other leaders across Texas who understand the needs, lived experiences, and aspirations of our Latino communities. Because this work is bigger than any one election, it is about our families, it is about our future, and it is about ensuring Latino voices are represented in every room where decisions are being made in order for our gente to move forward.
Thank you. And hi, everybody. I'm Beatrice Lopez, Executive Director of Vote Latino. Thank you, Michelle. What you are looking at right now, this coalition, this initiative, this moment is exactly what Republicans have spent years trying to prevent. Because they know what happens when Latinos organize, when Tejanos organize and vote. They know what happens when we stop asking for a seat at the table and start flipping the table entirely. The numbers are not abstract. Latino turnout in majority Latino counties surged 221% in this year's primary compared to 2022. In Texas 15, 34, and 35, 3 districts we intend to win, Democrats outvoted Republicans. Latino voters broke hard for Democratic candidates. This is not a disengaged electorate. This is an electorate that is watching, that is angry, and that is ready to elect leaders who will actually fight for them. The energy in this state is not potential anymore. It's kinetic. Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton have had every opportunity to govern for the people of this state. Instead, they delivered rising costs, healthcare stripped from families, and schools turned into battlegrounds. Our polling shows 62% of Americans say it's gotten harder to afford everyday expenses. And for Latino families in Texas, the bite is sharper. Groceries, rent, utilities, healthcare. Abbott and Republicans made this choice. We are going to make them answer for it. At Voto Latino, for the past decade, we've invested in reaching and mobilizing Tejanos. We have young college leaders on 16 Texas campuses and statewide digital program reaching more than 1 million Latino voters. This year, Voto Latino will run a full-scale paid ads and communications program targeting 1.3 million Latinos in Texas. We'll be meeting young Latinos where they're at and activating to flip Texas. Our collective efforts will meet the gap of the past. At tejanosfortexas.com, we'll be signing up volunteers, announcing big events to energize Tejanos, and making sure that Latinos in Texas fully embrace the power they have to move Texas forward. When we flip Texas, this story, this win, will belong to all Tejanos. Thank you. And now passing it to Ashley Segura at Jolt Action, an amazing partner who already has a win against Paxton under their belt.
Yes, good morning. My name is Ashley Segura, and I'm the Interim Communications Director with Jolt Action, the largest Latino youth civic engagement organization in Texas. Jolt knows exactly what it means to be targeted by Ken Paxton. He sued us twice, and we won both times. So let me be clear, attempts to intimidate Latino civic organizations will not stop us. They will only make our communities more determined to show up. Now we're taking that fight to the ballot box. We are proud to stand alongside our partners today in defense of our Latino communities, our democracy, and the future of Texas. For years, Jolt Action has built one of the most effective Latino civic engagement programs in the state because we understand something politicians often miss. Reaching Latino voters requires more than translating a message. It requires trust, culture, and real relationships. That is why our culture is always at the center of our work. Through programs like Poder 15, Jolt meets young Latinas and their families in spaces that already matter to our community. We use culture as an entry point for civic participation, leadership, and long-term power. Because our culture is not separate from democracy, it's where our power begins. And our approach works. Across Texas, Jolt has built a presence on 15 college campuses and developed more than 2,300 young leaders who are ready to organize, mobilize, and meet this moment. That impact matters, and frankly, that impact scares politicians like Ken Paxton. When politicians use their power to target organizations like Jolt, they are not just attacking one organization, they're attacking Latino political power. That is why this moment requires Latino organizations to band together, build grassroots power, and mobilize our communities this November. We are not waiting for permission to be heard. Our communities are not a campaign prop, our culture is not for sale, and Texas' future will not be decided without us. With that, I'll hand it over to Diana Isa, Texas State Director with Mi Familia Vota.
Thank you, Ashley. Good morning, everyone. My name is Diana, State Director for Mi Familia Vota here in Texas. I want to start out by recognizing the incredible work being done by all of the organizations here and the volunteers who are already signing up, knocking on doors, making phone calls, and talking with their neighbors. From organizing at pulgas and in neighborhoods, we are making sure that we are talking to each other as we have seen that this is what makes our democracy work best. At Mi Familia Vota, we have started knocking on doors already and listening to voters' concerns. These efforts matter because elections are won through conversations and relationships. Every door knocked and every voter contacted brings us one step closer to a stronger, more representative democracy. At the same time, though, we have to acknowledge a long-standing challenge. For decades, Latino communities have often been overlooked by campaigns and political organizations. In fact, polling from Unidos US found that more than 48% of Latino voters reported that they had not been contacted by a political party, campaign, or organization about voting. That statistic highlights a gap that still exists today and underscores why outreach matters so much, why our work matters. That's why these efforts of coming together are very important. They are about reminding people to vote. They are about building trust, listening to concerns, and ensuring that every eligible voter knows that their voice counts. We also have a proud history of Latinos coming together to protect the right to vote. Across generations, Latino leaders, community organizations, volunteers, and advocates have worked side by side to educate voters, defend voting rights, and make sure that every ballot is counted. At Mi Familia Vota, election protection is not just about what happens on election day. It's making sure that we can plan adequately to prepare for any given situation that may hinder the vote of our community. It is about ensuring fair access to the democratic process for everyone. Today, we continue that tradition by volunteering, by reaching voters who have often been ignored, and by standing up for election protection, we are strengthening our communities and our democracy. Together, we can make sure that every voter is heard, that every vote is counted, and that every voice has a place in shaping our future here in Texas. Thank you all. And now I'll pass it over to Ezra Levin at Indivisible.
Hey, thank you. What an honor to be part of this incredible group. Hey, folks, I'm Ezra. I'm the co-executive director of Indivisible National. I'm here on behalf of the hundreds of local Indivisible groups spread across every congressional district in the state of Texas, where I'm from, and the thousands of Indivisible groups that are spread across every single state. Look, folks, the billionaires and the fascists in Texas and in the White House are doing what they have been doing for years. They are trying to divide and conquer. That's what we see. They want to pit brown against white, against black, gay against straight, immigrant against native born, worker against worker. Because if we're divided, we're not focused on their corruption, on their malice towards Texans, on their incompetence. We get to focus on our fights amongst each other. We're not going to give them what they want. Look, Indivisible in Texas is not primarily made up of Tejanos. It's disproportionately white, disproportionately native born. And also, we all understand that we've got to treat an attack on one like an attack on all. That's how we win. There are more workers in Texas than there are billionaires. There are more pro-democracy, patriotic Texans than there are fascistic, segregationist Texans. There are more of us than there are of them, but we've got to link arms and organize. That's why we're here. And I got to say, it's easy to do that for this ticket. Look at this ticket, y'all. Gina Hinojosa, a Tejana who spent her life fighting for a public school. She's ready to take on Greg Abbott. James Tallarico quit Divinity School to teach in a Texas classroom and now wants to take that fight to the Senate. This isn't a ticket of consultants and careers. It's a ticket that actually looks like Texas. It sounds like Texas. It's ready to fight for Texas. We don't have to choose between the lesser of two evils. That's not what this general election is going to be about. We get to choose to vote for candidates who actually inspire. And that's why Indivisible is running the largest get out the vote and voter contact campaign in Texas than we ever have before. It's why we're supporting Tejanos for Texas. And it's why we're encouraging folks to go to tejanosfortexas.com and volunteer. Look, it's been more than 3 decades of Republican control of Texas, and they've used their power to enrich themselves and their donors while screwing over Texans all over the state. That ends this year. That ends with us. That ends with organizing together. So I think we're going to talk about that here. Some Q&A time? Christina, back to you.
Yeah, great. So if people can also drop their questions in the Q&A, I think we have one. I think Votar es Poder is going to help guide us through the questions.
Yes, thank you. So we do have the first question, and I'll also be putting it on the chat. It says, though the competitive House races are mostly in South Texas, the path for Talarico and Hinojosa has to involve energizing Latino turnout in the big urban counties, like in Texas. How does this coalition plan to enhance turnout in Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, etc.?
Ashley, did you want to take that, or did you want me to take that?
I can speak a little bit too about what Jolt's plan is. So we already have a successful formula that we have fine-tuned and perfected over multiple electoral cycles. Jolt Action has invested heavily in long-term infrastructure and youth leadership development across Texas. Our on-campus chapters across Texas colleges and universities are helping build the next generation of Latino civic leaders. We meet young people where they are and equip them with the tools to organize in their own communities. Our culturally confident organizing model uses art, culture, storytelling, and community connection to engage voters in authentic ways, and we allow them to see themselves in the process. That is how we turn record voter registration into record turnout. What Jolt is seeing is that young Latino Texans are not disengaged. They're hungry to participate, to organize. And if we organize them and we invest in them and speak to their lived experience, they turn out. And Jolt is committed to making sure that that happens.
And then
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to add for folks that are on this call. So in other key battleground states, there are often tables that exist that are coordinated by partners like America Votes. Here in Texas, we don't have one. And that's been part of the gap in the Latino vote, which is why we came together to make sure that we were coordinated about where we were organizing. We also built Tejanos for Texas.com to be able to recruit and mobilize volunteers together. We are going to be doing big days of action, especially post Labor Day, to knock on doors and do community events with Latino voters that's going to build momentum and energy in our community. And that, again, this is historic for us just working together at this level in Texas. And again, we're organizing everywhere we can. We have a lot of joint efforts in South Texas in these key congressional races in these key heavy Latino districts. But then Mi Familia Vota en Acción and Jolt Action are doing work in Houston and San Antonio and Dallas, along with others here on this call, Indivisible, Voto Latino. And so the work is across the state, but focused, of course, while some of the press, I love the question that was asked because it's a thoughtful question, because a lot of times people just talk about the Latino vote in South Texas when actually we exist everywhere. And in Houston, and in San Antonio, El Paso, and Dallas, these are mega centers where the majority of the Latino population lives. So we, of course, are organizing there as well. And just so people understand the historic nature of us working together at this level, I think speaks to the moment that we all see, the opening we see to necessary to be able to coordinate to have the impact we seek. And
I believe there's a second question here. The second question is David Hutoño, race and justice correspondent for Routers. For all and for any panelists, Diana touched on a critical point. Many Latinos in Texas say they weren't contacted in the primary. What are your organizations doing to close the gap? And for all panelists, Gina Hinojosa told me in December that her message for Latinos in Texas is exactly the same for non-Latinos. She's just saying it in Spanish. What are your thoughts about that strategy? Is it working? And for Michelle Vallejo, you ran two competitive campaigns against Monica de la Cruz. What is Bobby Pulido doing differently that will break through this election? So maybe we can start, I believe, with Diana, since that question was directed towards you.
Yeah, no, great question. That is a real statistic, and it's a statistic that doesn't land well with a lot of us that are doing year-round organizing. And so I think to answer the question, to fill in the gap or to fix that gap, what we are doing here at Mi Familia Vota is that we're actually having those conversations a lot earlier with voters versus waiting until the GOTV part of the timeline to come, or maybe 3 months before the election. We actually have really been focused on the relational organizing model since last year, because we know with the base that we currently have in Texas, it's going to be very difficult to win. So we actually need to see, and what I always say is we need to see more faces, more new faces in the process, in the organizing, in who we are turning out to vote. And what we are doing is making sure that we are having a lot of these relational organizing conversations. But here we've been doing it since last year. And so now we're just building on that, right? We're really putting people through the leadership pipeline and making sure that what we are hearing from voters is what we're using in order to be able to motivate them and mobilize them. So I think time has been in our favor. I think this time around shifted to not waiting a little bit before the elections. I think we really took it seriously in making sure that we started talking to voters since last year, and all of this year is just making sure that we're really defining how we're going to be mobilizing and energizing these voters that need to get out.
If I could add something too to that question, just to piggyback off of Diana, I think what you see right now, all ththese partners together, shows different strengths that we bring together. For folks who have been doing the work, like Mi Familia Vota, Jolt to Action, us are doing all the work on digital and really meeting people online and where they are through communications and the visible, activating different sort of constituencies. It's all part of a surround sound strategy, where Jolt is knocking on the doors, we're hitting them with digital targeting. And I think the gap that often feels where Latinos aren't being talked to, I think we're going to close that gap, because not only do we see sort of the potential that we've never seen in quite some time, and I know we always say this is the year for Texas, but I think it's very different because what you're seeing all across, and I think what Gina Hinojosa was getting to in her, and when she talks about what the same message being to non-Latino to Latino, is that people are feeling the pain, and Gina is really acknowledging the pain, which is the economic strain, the fact that they're fed up with the current administration in Texas, when they're fed up with the status quo. And the message is very simple. We can do differently. She can do differently. James Talarico can do differently and can really help Tejanos and Texas all together thrive. I think the temperature is different. It's happening everywhere where people are even organizing themselves. We're organizing with them, and we're really sort of speaking to a different message. And I truly think that this is the year where Texas, and in particular Latinos, will embrace their power to really shift Texas into different sort of landscape and different sphere politically, but culturally. And what happens in Texas will have an effect all across the country. So we're excited to be a part of it, and we're excited to close that gap.
Thank you. The other question is for anybody in the group about Gina Hinojosa sharing back in December that her message for Latinos is the same, but in Spanish. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I could jump in on this one. You know, over the past decade plus, there's always been this notion with the DC consultants, New York consultants, that you have to message differently to Latino voters to get them to vote for you if you're a Democrat. And it's always been largely on, in my opinion, on immigration. And it's like, yes, immigration is important, but it's not the only issue that we care about. And so I think what we're really making an emphasis here, what we saw in our polling with Unidos US, through Unidos US, is that Latino voters care about the same thing as non-Latino voters, and that is their pocketbooks, their cost of living, their healthcare, their housing, having the same economic prosperity and goals as everyone else is just as important to Latino voters as it is to, again, to everyone. And so I think Representative Hinojosa is very correct in saying, hey, we're saying the same thing to Latino voters as we are to non-Latino voters, because, again, data shows that that we care about the same issues, and we're not this weird subset that you need to do like specific talking to. Like, no, we're just normal people like everyone else. So speak to us and speak to us about the issues that we care about. And so I think she's accurate in sticking with that strategy.
Thank you, Eric. And we have a question directly towards Michelle Vallejo.
Yeah, so something I would love to point out about Texas 15 this cycle is that 60% of the district is a new district compared to the Texas 15 that I ran in. And this is also a reminder that right now in Texas, what we are fighting is a direct attack from Trump and Greg Abbott to strip away power from our Latino communities even more due to their mid-decade redistricting effort that unfortunately was successful. But I will that the numbers that they base that redistricting on are Trump numbers of 2024. Those numbers are not holding. We are already seeing in primary elections, special elections, that Latino voters are coming out in historic numbers. For example, I want to point out to Taylor Remit's win, a Senate district here in Texas, where he won with 79% of the Latino vote and of his district. And that's amazing. And these are numbers and these are signals to us that Latinos are paying attention. And even when we've been attacked, even when our districts have been redistricted, we can win back that power. Something significant also about Bobby Pulido is that we got right to work with him. So Latino Victory, as well as me personally, joining their team as their senior advisor, not just for Texas 15, but the entire state. I'm able to build off of the amazing work that so many people did in 2022 and in 2024 to make sure that in 2026, we get people like Bobby Pulido in Congress, and we get people like Johnny Garcia, who actually has part of the old Texas 15 district. So I've been able to work with him to engage people in the more rural parts of Texas 35, which were part of the more rural parts of the old Texas 15. This could sound a little convoluted for an everyday voter, but what everyday voters are paying attention to are the fact that gas is more than $4 a gallon, of the fact that life is harder now than it was a year or 2 or 3 years ago. And that is why candidates like Bobby Pulido are going to win, because the moment that we're fighting in is one where it's undeniable that our communities, our families are under direct attack. We could have an entire other conversation on the impact of the overreach of power when it comes to immigration enforcement and ICE raids. This is also a direct attack that affects us emotionally, culturally, economically in South Texas and in Texas 15. So we are energized. We are building on the work that we've done in former cycles. And another thing that is so obvious to point out about Bobby Pulido is that he's a unique and dynamic candidate that we've, quite frankly, I don't think we've ever had before. He is jumping in uh, with experience of connecting with people culturally for the past 30 years. And he's able to reach folks in untraditional ways, not just talking about politics, but talking about things that resonate with folks, whether you're a Republican, an independent, or not engaged at all politically. So we're really excited to be supporting Bobby and to see him cross this finish line in November.
Thank you very much. We don't have any more questions on the chat. If you're still with us, we still can take a few other questions. You can type it on the chat or use the Q&A box in the bottom. So I don't know if there's some more questions or if anybody wants to add anything to what has been shared. If not, I'll pass it on to Christina for any other thoughts. Oh, there is a question. For Ashley Segura, to sort of piggyback of the Pulido question, his efforts to reach people at quinces, you said culture can be used as an entry point. How does the political conversation develop out of shared culture? For Eric, the question is, you said people are figuring it out their political identity. For voters who first went with Republican candidates, how do you convince them to switch after that first foray into the political process? So we'll go with Ashley and then with Eric.
Yeah, so we have initiatives like Poder Quince, which is a culturally rooted voter engagement program that transforms quinceañeras into spaces for civic participation. So a quinceañera is already a powerful coming of age moment. And so we build on that by connecting identity with civic responsibility. Young Latinas make a commitment to be voters and leaders in their communities, and we engage their families and guests in the process. So we have a voter registration table at these quinceañeras. And so the whole program is about building generational power, just not just short-term turnout. And so we've seen that when young people claim their voice early, it changes how they engage politically for the rest of their lives. And so when we built on that recently, and so we launched Quince to the Polls. It's also a cultural, civic, and community celebration designed to mobilize Latino voters by blending our culture, family, and civic engagement. And this strategy activates local vendors, sponsors, and community organizations to help amplify outreach, build excitement, and drive voter turnout ahead of Election Day. We do that usually during early voting. We do these sort of markets that we all block walk to the polls together in different communities. And we've seen that it increases civic participation among the young Latino communities. And so it's just a powerful cultural symbol to make sure that civic engagement is accessible, fun, and already mixing it with things that people are already familiar with. And so through those programs, we've been able to empower young Latinas and their families to make sure that they're not just reaching their friends and family, but also that goes beyond those celebrations. It starts those conversations with their friends and peers.
Thank you. Then we'll pass it on to Eric.
Yeah, I think in the past, a lot of the political narrative and what people were voting based off of was largely controlled, in my opinion, by campaigns, by political parties. But now people are dealing with the real world consequences of policies being enacted by those in power, like the Trump administration, like Greg Abbott. And people are much more in tune into politics now and to what's happening. One, because we're inundated with so much information, but people are being affected by the choices being made by the Trump administration and by Governor Greg Abbott. And it's all boils down to economics, to pocketbook issues, to healthcare, to housing. And so whenever we're talking to people who voted for Republicans in the past, I've had numerous conversations with, three-time Trump voters who are now, seeing the light, better late than never, I guess you would say. And they're realizing, hey, I think we may have been misled in what the Trump administration or what Governor Abbott was doing. It's hurting the construction industry, it's hurting the restaurant industry, it's hurting so many jobs, and it's hurting people's pocketbooks at the end of the day, on top of it being a humanitarian crisis. And so people are literally feeling the effects of what's happening to them, because in the past, these issues kind of seemed sort of national and vague and didn't really hit close to home. Then it got kind of closer into the state level. And then now it's like literally in our neighborhoods where our friends and our neighbors are being, I would say, kidnapped out of their homes and off the streets and deported or being held in inhumane facilities. And so the effects of what's happening is hitting literally quite right next door. And I think it's quite jarring for people to see the visuals of people being separated from their families, from kids being in cages. I think people are just starting to finally wake up and see the effects of what's happening. And I think that's going to start moving people who may have been Trump voters over to hopefully voting for Democrats. And I don't want to say these people support Trump as a person. These are people, again, when it comes to Latino community, that just vote based off of pocketbooks. And in the past, Republicans have been very, very effective in messaging about economics and their pocketbooks. And now we're seeing that their messaging was not quite accurate, and people are feeling that. So they're looking for different options, and it's up to Democrats to, one, carry that, but also to deliver on the promises that are being made out on the campaign trails right now.
Thank you so much. We have one last question, and I believe this is open to anybody who wants to share it. How can we replicate, and it's coming by an anonymous attendees, replicate the same energy and success we saw in Stormy Madani's grassroots campaign?
I mean, I think a lot of that campaign was powered by volunteers and an economic populist message. And we have two Democratic candidates at the top of the ticket that are running on an economic vision for our country that steps away from kowtowing and serving big business and the billionaire class. We have two candidates that have refused corporate PAC donations at the top of the ticket, that want to be more accountable to ordinary Americans and their economic interests than to the ultra wealthy. And that's why we think they're going to win. And that's why we're standing behind them. And part of what we're doing is mobilizing the energy of volunteers in our community working together, because campaigns are won not just by donations, they're won by people. And they're won by, the work that Indivisible does, mobilizing and engaging volunteers across the country to stand up and demand that their elected officials are accountable to them. They're done by the work that Votar is doing in the Valley and organizing, and Michelle Vallejo and her team is doing organizing with candidates and making sure that they have everything they need to win, and Voto Latino reaching everybody online. So and everything else that everybody else is doing, there's just so many on the call, but I think that is how we're going to win and how we're mobilizing that energy. And people can go to Tejanos for Texas.com. And we encourage you all to cover that anybody can volunteer. They don't have to just be Latino, but that they want to organize this critical voting block with us. Please sign up now. We're going to be contacting people in the coming weeks and months and mobilizing them into action to fight for a future that's for all of us. And I'll just speak for myself. The reason I care so deeply is that these issues impact everyone. And here in Texas, if people care about, this is the biggest battleground state in the country, and you don't get to win without the Latino population. And so you can't have our votes if you're not willing to also have our voices and our issues at the forefront. And we're so proud that we have candidates that are willing to fight for our community, willing to fight for our economic interests, willing to fight for immigrants, willing to fight for our rightful place in a state where we make up the largest ethnic majority. So we're excited to get to work and work with all of these groups. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to the team that set the press release, and expect to hear more from us soon. And this is just the kickoff of the historic work that we're going to be doing across Texas together to mobilize Latino voters. Take care.
Thank you, Brianna, so much for everything.
Thanks, team.
Thank you,
Thank
team.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.